Good evening, everybody. Welcome back. Thank you for being with us today. Welcome to this information study session of the Lansing School District Board of Education. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Dr. Beverly?
Present.
Dr. Body? Dr. Burrows? Ms. Hodgen? Mrs. Lawrence?
Present.
Mrs. Lilji? Mr. Lopez? Dr. Rodriguez? Mrs. Willis? Quorum is present.
Thank you. And such as last night, Dr. Burrows did inform us that he would not be able to join us this evening. Moving on, any additions to the agenda this evening? Better not be. Seeing none. Any public comment? Okay, thank you. Moving on to our 3 items of business for this evening, our 3 remaining superintendent candidate interviews. We will be starting this evening with Dr. Shaun Black. And again, community members, if you weren't with us last night, just to kind of let you know what we're doing here, we've got our 2 consultants from MASB, Jay and Greg, who will be in the back of the room and in the aisleway. They have feedback forms that they will hand you for each candidate. They'll go ahead and collect those feedback forms at the end of each interview, and the board is given those feedback forms at the end of the evening. We do really appreciate your feedback and take it very seriously, so please give us all of your observations as you see fit. Dr. Black, we're ready for you.
Thank you, I appreciate it. Shake
We'll
your
just
hand,
wave.
shake hands. Hello, greetings. Thank you.
Thank you very much for joining us this evening. Following the interview questions, you will have the opportunity to make concluding remarks and ask a question as time allows, but as you know, we have a 60-minute time limit. We've had the opportunity to review your resume. Please tell us how your background and experiences make you a good fit to be our next superintendent.
Okay. Thank you for the opportunity. It's truly a pleasure to be here to talk about teaching, learning, and leadership. So once again, thank everybody for coming out. I appreciate it. Why am I fit for Lansing Public Schools? Well, first I'm going to start with your search criteria. When I first reviewed it, I emailed the search consultant and said this resonated with me. I have highlighted what I believe, in my opinion, I might be a little biased, but my experiences that align to what you're looking for. I have in the red, I have previous superintendent experience preferred. In all honesty, I have never been a superintendent, and you know that from reviewing my resume. But I've been working closely with district leaders since 2015 with my time at the Achievement Network. So deeper into why I'm a fit for this position, preparation. There's no sacrifice for proper preparation for any position or anything you're doing in life. I was a classroom teacher for 10 years in urban settings, South and Detroit Public Schools. After that, I transitioned to a school leadership position, assistant principal in Battle Creek Public Schools. And then I was a principal at a charter school just outside of Detroit. Then I had the great fortune to go to a educational nonprofit headquartered in Boston called the Achievement Network, where I was a principal coach and a curriculum coach, where we worked with principals on understanding the transition to the Common Core, which was not really done appropriately in Michigan, in my opinion. I also have a doctorate in educational leadership and policy studies from Wayne State University. My dissertation research was on urban schools and why urban schools make institutional progress. And I have that defined in my packet on page 9, what institutional progress is, but simply put, what are the quantitative and qualitative measures that we're looking for to determine if the quality of education is actually occurring in the school district. So that was my dissertation research, and it was on urban school districts. One of the districts I studied was Boston, which had a significant increase in standardized test scores and graduation rates, and a decrease in dropout rates. and my minor was in curriculum instruction. I think it's very hard to be an assistant superintendent or superintendent if you don't have a deep knowledge of curriculum and instruction to make the changes in the classroom, because that's where the magic happens, that needs to happen. And then also, outside of those things I think have prepared me for this role, I would say the preparation with the Michigan Leadership Institute with their Superintendent Academy that I attended in 2016. I would also say my professional development with the Standards Institute, taking an even deeper dive into the standards, understanding the Common Core curriculum. And also I've had recent trainings through MASB for superintendent positions. And lastly, I do hold a certification from the Michigan Department of Education, a central office administrator certification. So I would say those are the things that prepared me. I would say, in summary, the rich quality and diversity of my experiences make me a candidate, ideal candidate for this position. I haven't been in one district the entire time where I've only seen one way of doing things. I had the great fortune, I mentioned Achievement Network, to travel across the country to see best practices happen in places where you don't think they would happen. So I bring that to Lansing. I think that would be a great benefit. Also, my experience as assistant superintendent in Detroit right now. I think Detroit has been known for some things through state management, emergency management, have not been very well taken. But under leadership of our current superintendent, things are headed in the right direction. So I think that's been a great experience. In terms of numbers, I worked in Battle Creek Public Schools, so the demographics of Battle Creek, not so much the enrollment numbers, but the demographics are similar. So I've been in a similar type of district setting as well. I'll also add that in my current role as assistant superintendent in Detroit, I'm over 25 schools. I have 11,000 students that I'm responsible for overseeing, and I supervise 25 principals. So in terms of the workload and the management, that makes me also a fit for your position. And if you look at my packet, you'll see as you go through it that it aligns with your strategic plan, even though your strategic plan is going to be redone soon. It does align, especially with my core values section. And then lastly, just if you go through your superintendent search report, the stakeholders made it very clear they wanted someone to not disrupt what achievements you've made thus far, but to make sure that someone does have the skill set to bring some level of change where change is needed. So I think that will be something that I would say is a fit for this district. And lastly, just results. In this position, you have to get results. And my track record of success, I think, makes me an ideal candidate for this position because I've gotten results. I've gotten results in Battle Creek as an assistant principal. I've gotten results at the charter school. I've gotten results as a curriculum assistant superintendent. I guarantee that we're going to have results in Detroit at the end of this school year. I don't know how this virus thing is going to play out, but if things go, if the kids are still in school for the next month or two, I think you're going to see results. So those are the things I would say in summary are why I believe that I'm a fit for this position.
Thank you. Please share an example of a time you have led a sustained multi-year improvement initiative. Be specific regarding the situation, the task at hand, your specific role, and the outcome.
Okay, so in terms of multi-year initiatives or acts of improvement, first, are they aligned to the mission, vision, and goals of the district? That's number one. Number two, how are they going to impact student outcomes? And then lastly, how are they aligned to the broader district strategy? So when you're looking at that, you have to answer those three questions. And then once you look at that, you start researching what you're going to do. So what are case studies, empirical research, data that supports you should do this? Now, once you've answered yes on all those things, this is the best thing for us to do, you proceed forward. So my experience in this is currently as assistant superintendent, we implemented curriculum 2 years ago, rigorous grade level curriculum through Common Core aligned. And the process started where we had to use a third party to determine what's the best curriculum available to us, number one. Two, we have to get input and feedback from teachers because they are going to be the group that is responsible for implementing the curriculum. So we elicited their feedback. And then from there, it was now how are we going to implement it with fidelity? And then how are we going to manage it? And then how are we going to actually progress monitor it for success? So one of my roles is when I go to a school is to visit to see curriculum implementation in math and ELA. How is it being done every single day? Is it done according to the standards that we have set forth as a district? So we do classroom walks, and we just monitor those things so we can make sure that our kids are receiving grade level content so they can be successful. So that is my current role, and that's one of the main initiatives that I monitor or I'm a part of, and I just kind of walked you through the process. So that is really, I can say, what I've done with a multi-year initiative to make sure it's done with fidelity. But the last thing is, when you do something, when you implement something that is that broad, that's going to have that type of impact on children, you have to also celebrate the successes. And that's one of the things that we always do is celebrate the teachers, schools, principals. We celebrate their successes because when we do that, other schools and other people see, okay, they're doing it right, they're being celebrated, but also students are learning. So at the end of the day, we celebrate you, but also students are learning. So that's my experience with a multi-year initiative.
Thank you. Managing vision and purpose involves anticipating future trends, creating a compelling vision, and communicating that vision. Describe a situation that conveys your capability in this area.
Okay, so I've always been part of making sure the vision comes to life. So if I were to become a superintendent, I think you have on page 4 of the leadership packet, you have an idea of what it takes to build a vision. And I think if you look at the 6 points that I have listed, it's very, very important. You start with strategic plan. What is our strategy that we're going to focus everything around? Then what are the initiatives that are going to support this strategy so it can be successful? And with the goal of improving student achievement at scale. Excuse me, I'm a little nervous. Let me go back. Then when you're doing that, you're going to establish metrics. And those metrics will let you know and let you progress monitor how successful you're doing, and also allow you to course correct. And then you have to develop systems to make sure that everything is going according to plan and that you check the fidelity of the implementation of whatever you're doing in the district. And then not lastly, but the big thing is when you're going to do any type of vision, it has to be shared. And the shared vision comes from understanding what the goals are of the district, but also a big part of it is understanding how you are going to fund this vision, this mission in the district. So it's one thing to say we want kids to have, for my example, building the brightest future for every student, but once again, are we funding it correctly to make this happen? So are we supporting teachers the right way to make it happen? Do we have the supports from central office to work with schools to make this happen? So that's a big part of it. And then as the last part, number 6, is you have to celebrate people when they do things well. That's one of the big things I believe in. So if you're going to do any type of vision and mission building, it has to be something that you celebrate as well. So that's how I'll just leave that right there. But if I were to do it, it'll be along these 6 pillars right here.
Thank you. Please tell us what the term culturally competent means to you. Give an example of how you demonstrate this characteristic and your experience in bringing a diverse group of people to consensus on a difficult issue.
Okay. So culturally competent, the way I understand it is someone understanding another person or acknowledging another person's culture, way of life, or beliefs, and acknowledging it, and not acknowledging and saying that, okay, I understand that you are a Muslim. It's acknowledging in the fact that we respect your religion, and in our district, we don't have prom during Ramadan. That's just something we don't do, because we, once again, are a culturally competent district, so we respect that aspect of their religion. So we don't have prom during Ramadan. But also in terms of what students are exposed to. When I was a teacher, I remember there was always one section dedicated to African American history when I taught history. But once again, acknowledging the differences in people, celebrating the differences, and having that as a way of life, not just, oh, it's just Black History Month in February. How are we celebrating Black History Month every month? How are we celebrating anything around our Hispanic students as well? And then the last part of your question, consensus building, did I hear that correctly? So it starts with the empirical facts, the data. So if you're going to build a consensus, you have to start with facts that people cannot argue with. You eliminate opinions and biases. That's the number one thing that you do in terms of consensus building. Then you seek feedback. If you want consensus, you want everybody on the same page, you have to ask everyone, you have to bring everybody to the table, or at least reasonably bring people to the table so they can participate in the process. And then lastly, you have to develop a strategy that's going to actually impact student achievement and in the best interest of students in the school context. So if we're going to build consensus, we're thinking about students first. It's aligned to the research and data that supports it, but also everyone's had a chance to weigh in on whatever initiative or whatever we're doing, and they can support it. So that when it is rolled out, people are bought in because they had a part of the process, not it was done to them, essentially.
Thank you. Just going to give my colleagues a minute. Tell us how you maintain visibility and accessibility for staff, parents, and community groups.
Well, visibility starts with being in schools. As an assistant superintendent, I do have 25 schools, but visibility starts with me visiting schools. I visit 3 to 4 schools every day. I have schools, if you're familiar with the Detroit region, I have schools by Redford Township on the west side. I have schools by Grosse Pointe on the east side, and I have schools in southwest Detroit by Dearborn. So I track a big area, but you have to be visible. That's number one. You have to be in the school. So if I was a superintendent, I know I probably couldn't do that, but I probably would visit in the morning. I think would be manageable, 2 schools per day. That's something I would commit to, because when teachers see you, students see you, principals see you, they have to see that you're one of them and you're not just someone in an office sending emails. I think that's a big thing. They understand that you care about what's going on in the classroom, and you're willing to see for yourself what's going on in the classroom. So in terms of visibility, that's what I would do. In terms of accessibility, and also in terms of other activities like the sexting game, when schools played each other, I would be in attendance as well. And then in terms of accessibility, we have in our district, we call it a constituent response system. So when someone emails the superintendent, they will get a response. I believe that's something that I would do. In my previous district prior to Detroit, that was not done. Not to throw anyone under the bus, it just wasn't done. That's how you're accessible. People know that if they reach out, you'll respond. And I think that's probably one of the rudest things that can happen is you send an email with a question or expecting a response and you get no response. So in terms of accessibility, that's one thing I would do. And then the other thing is, depending on what the board will be comfortable with, I would like to do community meetings in terms of every other month where either a board member or 2 would be with me and parents would be allowed to come and just ask questions or voice concerns. That's how you're accessible. And then I'm also thinking, if I become a superintendent, having what I call superintendent Saturdays, where I would hole up in a coffee shop somewhere and really just meet people and advertise that as a way to have access to the superintendent. One of the leadership lessons I learned, and to close out when I was an assistant principal, was people will respect you, people will follow you if they know you're willing to, because you're in a leadership position, to come and meet them where they are. They're less likely to follow you if you're the person who has the high position, sits high up in the superintendent office and sends emails, doesn't visit schools, doesn't talk to teachers, doesn't know a student's name. That's going to be very hard to be a superintendent, in my opinion, to be a successful one. So just knowing those are things that I would do to be successful, is to be accessible, especially during the constituent response, because people have schedules where they might not be able to come to the board office, but they can send an email when you can have the dignity to give them a response.
Often we learn from successfully facing challenges or experiencing mistakes or failures. Please share a time when this was the case for you. What did you learn from the experience? How did you apply what you learned?
Okay, failure. Learning from failure. I guess I'd have to go back to, I have two things in my mind. I'm gonna go with the one that happened earliest in my career. So I was an assistant principal in Battle Creek Public Schools at the high school, Battle Creek Central. And after my first year, out of school suspension days were 623 days for my cohort of students. So when I met with my principal afterwards, going into my final evaluation, he gave me an effective rating, but he asked me, he's like, what could you have done differently? And I didn't know the answer to that question. And so he just really took me down the process of how to use data strategically and to be proactive in preventing issues. So by doing that, suspension that next year, the results went down to 166. Now, it wasn't a lack of me, I would say, being soft on kids. It was, I had class meetings, bi-quarterly class meetings with students. So I met with my students. I told them expectations for behavior, how I respond to certain infractions. They understood that. And then also from there, using the data, I knew which group of my students were Tier 3 students, so how I had to check in with them, but also where were the hot spots in the building for my students, and to make sure I position myself and security staff in those areas to be proactive. So that I would say would be the biggest learning experience, because it really taught me to look at data a different way, because I was just looking at, okay, these are the infractions, and I just looked at the infractions and the number, but not how to really look at how do you really change the mindset of students around behavior at a high school setting. So I would say it was a learning experience, because I walked out of there feeling bad. I walked out of there feeling bad, like I had let him down. But I just felt renewed going into the next school year that we weren't going to have that same conversation. And I was going to take his feedback and advice and do better, and I did.
Please describe how you would work to create a learning and working environment that is welcoming, inclusive, and increasingly diverse. How would you make sure that this is supported across the district and community?
When you want to create a welcoming environment, number one, you have to invite people in. People have to feel comfortable there. If we're talking about just from the employee standpoint, there has to be, I would say, common goals. We have common goals as a school that we want to achieve. That's number one. And when you have those common goals, if I was supervising teachers, what are the expectations for success? So if it's going to be a welcoming environment for teachers, they have to feel that I clearly know what I need to do to be successful to meet these goals. I think the other part of it, and what we're doing in Detroit that I think is very different than in other places I've been, it's the support with it. So we have expectations, but we give you support as well, so that you can be successful. So with our curriculum implementation, we have central office staff members who work directly with teachers to support them. So if they're identified by the principal as someone who needs support, we have people who work with them so they could be successful. So I think that's part of it. If you're going to have a welcoming environment, what are the goals, what are the expectations, how is there support, but also at the end of the day, we're all people. If it's going to be a welcoming environment for staff, students, anyone, you have to be treated with dignity and respect. There's no substitute for that, and there's no excuse for that not to happen in the school district. When people leave, especially in a study, in my dissertation study, the couple of the parents did mention that they just had a negative experience. So that's something that will cause people to leave. It's not so much the test scores, sometimes it's the experience. And those are things we have to make sure, not saying it's germane to Lansing, but just in general as educators, make sure that that doesn't happen. So those are things I'll work on, but also that requires support and additional training to make sure that we provide customer service so people have those good experiences, because one of the big things we know is word of mouth. If you have a bad experience, you're going to tell somebody. You're going to put it on Facebook. We know those things. So how do we avoid those things? But those are kind of the pillars I would use to create a welcoming environment.
How do you recruit, develop, and lead a management team? Give us an example of how you've done this in the past.
So recruiting, if you're a school leader, you're always recruiting. You always have your eye on talent, because you understand that the more talent that you have in the organization, the more likely you're going to have student success. So if I'm going to conferences, I'm not that even if I don't have an actual vacancy, what I would say is developing a bench of potential people that I would put on a short list to recruit and bring to the district. That way, then when you do have a vacancy, it's not for a long period of time, and then you're at the whim of whoever applies. But you have an eye of who you want. So I think that's the first part, is recruit. Did I hear develop in that question as well? So when you're developing leadership talent, or you're developing any type of talent in the school district, you want to have a concrete plan. One of the things in my dissertation study was in Boston Public Schools, one of the biggest things that they attributed their turnaround was the development of leaders in their school district and potential leaders. So when I was currently in Detroit, well, last school year, one of the things I oversaw was the leadership development program for the entire district. And by doing that, I'm identifying talent, but then I'm also supporting talent so they can become assistant principals, potentially principals, or central office staff. So I have that experience. And when you have people who are developed and ready, you don't have to, once again, worry about who at a whim is going to apply for a position. That's another part of it as well, that development part. And then I guess if we're talking about development, and one of the things that we're doing in the district around development, I have it somewhere in this packet, on page 8, at the top, you have the national standards for educational leaders. So if I was a superintendent, this would be something in terms of professional development I would take district leaders through to make sure that we're all aligned on what the competencies are for educational leaders. And then if we're normed on this and calibrated on this, then I think we have a better lens on what we can do inside the school. And then the last part of your question was develop and then lead. When you're talking about leading a group of people, in my opinion, then I would go back to the way I work. I believe that this job or educational leader should approach this job as a superintendent on page 6, which is our way of work. If you're going to lead a school district or lead a group of educational leaders, there has to be some level of accountability to the goals that you're trying to achieve. You have to collaborate with everyone in the organization. But I think the big thing is you're data-driven and you're developing people. As you see right there, you have to praise. I think you can't lead without giving praise. Studies have shown that when you praise people, productivity increases. That's a Hawthorne effect. But also, if you're going to lead people, there has to be a level of quality control. You can't do a whole bunch of things hoping that out of the 20 things you do, one of them works. There has to be measures put in place so you're actually analyzing quality control. And Barry Gordy, if you look, he has a documentary, I think, on Showtime. He talks about that as one of the biggest principles of why Motown was a successful record label, is that quality control piece that he implemented during his time as the president. And then if you're going to lead, you have to have a strategy. Everybody has to know the roadmap. Everybody has to know what we're doing and how everything fits together in a well-oiled machine, or I would say how the puzzle fits together to, once again, improve student achievement so students can have and experience success. So managing, recruiting, developing, that's the process I probably would approach or use, excuse me.
Thank you. Describe how you go about engaging and affirming staff members.
Well, engaging, I think, starts with the visibility question that you asked. You have to be in schools. It's hard to engage staff members or students or parents if you're if you're stuck in your office or you're in your office sending emails all day. So I think the big thing is you're visible, you're in schools. That's the first part of engagement. I think the other part of engagement I mentioned earlier was if people reach out to you, that you reach back in terms, especially with the constituent response. That's very important. But the also part with engagement, when I was in Battle Creek, I was over the Teacher of the Month program. And that really brought life to the staff and to staff morale, to be honored for Teacher of the Month. We currently do that in my 25 schools, Teacher of the Month. They're all honored. And in the district, we have Educator of the Year. So in terms of affirming the hard work that you do, we would reward you or honor you yearly or annually at a Teacher of the Year ceremony. That's the way I think in terms of engaging. But also the big part with engaging, especially if we're talking about teachers in particular, would be seeking feedback from them. The magic, I mentioned earlier, the magic happens in the classroom. It's hard to have an engaged staff if you do not ask them what they think, if you do not seek their feedback. So I think that's the biggest part about engagement is you're asking them, what do you think about this? What's your input on this? And part of that also in our district that we do in terms of engagement and we incorporate in our school improvement plans, we have a survey, and we're actually in the midst of surveying teachers right now, but we have a survey that we give every year, and that survey really informs what our school improvement focus should be in the next year. So teachers do it, parents do it, students do it. So it's really in terms of we want this school to improve, but we know that maybe the principal does not have all the answers. The assistant superintendent does not have all the answers. But people who come in contact with the school every day, they might have some of the answers. So we elicit their feedback as well in surveys. So that's the way I would engage. I think engagement is really in terms of if someone reaches out, you reach out as well. And I think that's just simply put how I'd approach it.
How do you go about making decisions on controversial issues?
Decisions on controversial issues. I think first you start with, you have to do your due diligence. You have to research whatever the issue is thoroughly. Are there case studies on this issue? Is there research on this issue? What are federal, state, and district policies on this issue? That will be the first step in that. And then what's the impact on students with this issue? How will it impact students? And then probably, and it's very important, what are the possible unintended consequences of this course of action? And especially legal. So I think when you think about things like that, you have to think about the legal ramifications of doing things. Because if I'm the superintendent, I don't want to do something, and then the district gets sued as a result of my actions. The other part of it is when you're thinking about something that's controversial, you have to, of course, consider and get feedback from probably people who are mentoring or people you trust, and people's opinions you trust. Then the last part of it, not the last part, but definitely an important part of it, is the board. You have to include the board in this process as well. The last thing I would want you to do is read the newspaper and it says Lansing Schools is doing this, and you didn't know anything about it. And then also that gives you an opportunity to provide your feedback on what you think is appropriate course of action. So when we proceed to the public, we're all on the same team or a unified front. So that's the way I would approach a controversial issue, is seeking feedback, informing the board, getting the board's opinion and support, but also how does it align with best practices, case studies? Is it something that's worth doing? But also how will it impact students? So that's kind of the approach I use for controversial issues.
Tell us what budget development process you use and how you gain broad support for the final result.
Okay, so in terms of budgeting, if you go on page 5, you have goals, and goal number 4 really talks about how I would approach the budgeting process. It would be a zero-based budgeting process where you're really looking at and analyzing how are the things in the budget impacting student achievement currently. how will those things impact the human resources in the district? How those things that we're going to do impact physical resources? So that's the part of budgeting that I would approach. How what we're considering doing with the budget, how those things impact our priorities and student achievement. At the end of the day, it's about how it impacts student achievement. And in the budget development process, there are considerations that you must have going through the process. Number one, enrollment trends. You have to know where enrollment might be so you have an idea of what revenues you might have. That's number one. You have to know within the budget the fixed costs. There are certain things that are fixed in the budget that you have nothing you can control, like certain transportation costs are fixed. There are certain routes they're going to go, no matter what, they're pretty much fixed. Then you have to also think about the variable costs in the budget, what things might go up in the budget, especially with retirement, the retirement part of it. Plant Moran did a study in Farmington Public Schools, and they project 42% of every dollar will be spent on retirement in 2020. So those are the things that I would consider going into the budget process, but the number one thing is how will it affect student achievement? And then on the other side of it, how will, if we do budget cuts, hypothetically, if we have to have that conversation, how will it impact the classroom, number one? You want to have minimal impact on the classroom. You want to have minimal impact on families. And what do I mean by that? In my research, in my dissertation, parents left school districts because of schools closing, and there was no rhyme or reason to how they closed. So you have to have, when you do things like that, you have to make sure you minimize that impact on families. Because if you close a school, and especially if there's a sibling situation, you're creating an unnecessary transition, and you know what, I'll just go somewhere else. And that's usually what happens. So those are the things you have to consider, those unintended consequences of your budget process. But the big thing is protecting student achievement and protecting the classroom.
What does an effective relationship between the board and superintendent look like, and how do you cultivate such a relationship?
Okay, so a good board, superintendent, I use the word team, starts with trust. So whomever you hire through this process, if it were me, I would just assume that you hire me, you have some level of trust that you decide to go with me. And then from there, we develop that trust moving forward. So number one is trust. I think number two, think about it, I think about in this aspect going back to trust. And in a relationship, whether it's with your wife, if you're, your kids, there has to be a level of trust. So I just bring that back to how that would move forward in a board superintendent team. The other thing is understanding roles and responsibilities. I understand that boards hire the superintendent, also understand boards make policy decisions, but the board also entrusts the superintendent to run the daily operations. So understanding those roles and responsibilities is very important, and it goes back to the trust factor. If you hire me to be a superintendent, you trust that I'm going to do the daily operations a certain way to your liking. And then, excuse me, the last part would be open communication. It's very hard to have trust. It's very hard to understand roles if you can't communicate. So for me, it will be finding what level or mode of communication fits for the 9 members on this board, and then going that route. And then moreover, going deeply is if I were the candidate hypothetically, if I was a superintendent hypothetically, it will be more going into after getting to know individual board members. What's your passion? Why are you on the board? Why are you serving children? I think that's very important to know. And so that we can come to an understanding of, I'm about kids, I'm about supporting kids, I'm about student success, but I think that's very important too, to know that as well. So that's kind of how I would approach it. It starts with trust. It starts with knowing roles and responsibilities, but also open communication. The big thing is, I will inform the board probably on a weekly basis of pertinent things in the district. That's the mode of communication I think will work best. in my opinion. But also, I believe in no surprises and no ambushes, and I think that goes both ways. That the board, they know something to share it, and vice versa. So I would never put you in a position where you're at the gas station, somebody walks up to you and asks you about something going on in schools, and you have no idea of what they're talking about, because that doesn't put you in a good light, and vice versa. So those are the things that I think make up a good superintendent or board superintendent team.
Tell us about your experience in the development and implementation of one specific program change or initiative. What processes did you use? How did you involve others?
So I would say and I'm just amazed that I'm sitting here in a superintendent interview and I'm talking about my assistant principal experience, but I think that bodes for the experience I had in Battle Creek. I would say it was like October, November, the seasons were changing in my first year as an AP. My principal brought me in and said, I'm tasking you with addressing the course failure rate in the school. At the time, it was just north of 20%, I want to say 21%, 22%, somewhere around there. And he said, you're going to develop a team. These are the people I would like you to incorporate, but you can incorporate other people. And by the end of the school year, we need a comprehensive plan of what we're going to do to decrease course failures. So I organized a team. They're mainly of what we had instructional coaches in the district, so they taught part of the day, and then they were supporting the instructional improvement on our campus. And we went to Solution Trees PD in Grand Rapids during the summer, and then from there we came with a proposal to our principal. In short, it's in my packet in the back, the actual referral. So it's not numbered, but it's in the back where it says Battle Creek Central Academic Intervention Referral Form. And I just take pride in that, because what we did with this program was we just closed the cracks in our school. We had 1,200 students. We were just making sure no more kids fell through the cracks. And the big thing I would say is in urban schools, and I'm not saying Lansing particularly, but just generally speaking, you have a situation where kids, I would say, get silent Fs. They aren't behavior problems. They don't cause problems. They don't say much. But the thing is, they don't do much. And that was one of the emphases of our program, is to identify those students before they had failures and before they were behind and where they couldn't graduate. And so it really incorporated, as you see if you actually are looking at the referral, it really incorporated things embedded in the master schedule, different roles and responsibilities, but it really put into perspective that we aren't going to let you fail. I mean, so anecdotally, the first group of kids I brought in that I had to meet with, I didn't see them second go around. And I should have kept better stats on this, but I didn't see them second go around, because how many people get called to their office, to assistant principal office, for getting Ds and Fs? Doesn't happen often. But it just showed the level of concern we have for our students. That's the one thing that I really implemented from start to finish on my own, that I led. And at the end of the school year, when we did actually go back through the course failures, it decreased to 8%, I believe. It was 8%. So we saw like a 13% or so decrease in course failures. But the big thing is, it really changed the culture in our school of, hey, they're going to call you to the office if you're getting Ds and Fs. It's just simply, it was something that we could not allow. It was simply unacceptable for dealing with students in urban setting, to allow them to come to school every day and allow them to get a D or an F. Like, that's the way that transcript is going to help them later in life. No, we had to intervene to do that as well. And as you see, there wasn't an attendance piece built in this as well. So we just really wanted to make sure that we were doing everything to support kids. So in terms of initiative, I know that's a while back, but that's the one thing where I brought people together. We had a common purpose. We had a data point we were attacking, and then the results were successful the next year. And the last thing is, we incorporated teachers so that they understood, and that's why this referral is only one page, because the teachers made it very clear. We don't want to do a whole lot. If we're going to start this process, we want to make it simple, clear, so that's why there's a lot of circling and checking on this sheet. So we incorporate their voice as well, so we can have this. So when it was rolled out, it was done with fidelity.
What unique skills or experience do you bring to this position, and how will the Lansing School District be served by this?
Okay. So, in terms of skills and skills, number one, I facilitated professional development ever since I've been in leadership positions. As an assistant principal at the Achievement Network, as a curriculum instruction assistant soup, and then now as an assistant soup in Detroit Public Schools. So I've facilitated professional development. So I think that's a skill that you can get in front of educators and lead them through something that you think will benefit their practice. I think that's a skill. I think another skill that I have is data analysis. I think understanding how to break down data and really identify where students are struggling, and then how to develop systems to support them. I think that's a skill that I also have as well. And if you look at my leadership packet on page 8, I think a skill that I have that I think is would bode well in this position is a deep knowledge of the role of the principal in the school improvement process. If you look at the graphic there, principals, second to teachers, will actually improve student achievement the most. And from my experience at the Achievement Network, and more so in Detroit, really understanding the role of the principal in the school improvement process to make student achievement happen. I will say my time at the Achievement Network and taking a deep dive into the Common Core state standards, I was rushing, I think is a skill that most people who get to maybe a superintendent level do not have. They don't understand the foundational skills that are in the Common Core. They don't understand how the Common Core is developed and built, and they don't understand how that really provides equity in the district. I think that's as well. So if we have any English teachers in the audience, they could tell you that Reading Standard 1 in 5th grade asks teachers to teach students how to quote. Now, you go to 6th grade, that same standard nuances to being able to cite information. Then to the 7th grade, to cite several sources. So I don't think many superintendents know that. They don't understand how it was developed and how it really benefits student achievement. So I would say that's a skill. The other skill I think that makes me a good candidate for this position is just a deep knowledge of teaching and learning. It's hard to lead an educational institution and you weren't a great teacher. And I'm not saying I was the best teacher or the best thing since sliced bread, but I have a deep knowledge of understanding what teaching and learning is, what quality instruction looks like, but also how to coach individuals to change their practice. The big thing about changing student achievement is if you look at the graphic, for example, if you're able to push teachers and coach teachers, their instructional quality improves, student achievement improves. So. I think that I bring that to the table. And I think lastly would be interpersonal skills. I'm a little nervous right now, so I'm not sure if that's showing right now. But being able to bring people together to get breakthrough results. I've been able to experience that in multiple positions, multiple settings. But it really takes people to understand that, one, you know what you're talking about, but two, you're able to build concrete plans, but three, you're able to support people so that they feel whole. And I think that's the big thing. You want people to change their practice, but you have to support them so they feel whole in the process. And I think that I bring that to the table.
Tell us how your previous professional experiences in education have influenced you as a leader.
Can you repeat that, please?
Sure. Tell us how your previous professional experiences in education have influenced you as a leader.
So I mentioned Battle Creek a number of times, but I'm going to start off with what got me to this table. When I was a 9th grade student at Detroit Cass Technical High School, my principal, Dr. David Sneed, approached me in the hallway. We had about 3,300 students at the time in the school, and he knew my last name. It shocked me. But he said words to me that have changed my course in my life, the trajectory in my life, when he said, "My goal is your success. So even though I wasn't a professional at the time, those words are the words that I kind of live by. If I'm a superintendent, if I'm an assistant superintendent, if I'm a principal, I'm an assistant principal, you are there because your goal is the success of students. Your goal is the success of teachers. Your goal is really the success of parents. You want as many parents not to pay for college as possible. So once again, those words of leadership really inspired me. So he was a principal, so at the time I wanted to be a principal. He became the superintendent. Then I wanted to become the superintendent, become a superintendent, excuse me. So I would say it starts there. Other leadership would be Battle Creek. Battle Creek really taught me, and I mentioned this several times, and it was an assistant principal experience. It wasn't a principal experience. But what made it unique was when I would talk to my other friends who were assistant principals, they weren't doing nearly the stuff we were doing. We got off the priority list in 1 year, off the focus list in 1 year. Our scores went up, graduation rate went up. So we were able to do things in a short amount of time through our systems approach. And I think that really helped in embedding interventions and supports in the master schedule. Leadership experiences would also be the Achievement Network. When you're able to travel the nation and see best practices codified, and I have it later in the back of my packet, you see an Achievement Network document, our leader levers, but you really get to see it can happen. Despite per pupil funding, despite all the other challenges kids might face, you can see success in the classroom. And last but not least, this experience in Detroit Public Schools has been transformative. We are making great strides. We are improving student achievement. We're changing the narrative of what can be done after a decade of state control. And the big thing is that I will give my superintendent 110% credit for is he has a vision, but also besides the vision, the reform work that goes with it. How are we supporting students every single day? How are we supporting teachers every single day? How are we supporting principals every single day? How are we supporting people like myself in central office every single day to be successful? Because the end goal is student success. So if I were to quickly say my leadership experience, it would be what got me to want to become an educational leader. That's number one. But also those transformative experiences in Battle Creek, the Achievement Network, and currently in Detroit Public Schools.
We appreciate your interest in becoming our next superintendent. Do you have any questions for us?
Yes, I do. I just have two questions. The first question would be, what things keep you at night, per se, as a board member in the school district?
What things keep us up at night? Is that the question?
You might not be up to 1 in the morning, but
Well, I have a 4-month-old, so that is currently keeping me up at night.
I have an 8-month-old, so I feel your pain.
We had these similar questions many times, believe us. But everybody here is here because has a soul for the students and for the community. I have been an educator, and the people who have not been in education here are dedicated their lives to many of the things that you mentioned here today. We love this community, we love the schools, we love what is going on, and we want our students to be #1 all over the world. That is the reason kid me, doesn't matter at what time, I got to go home.
I guess for me, the thing that I worry the most about is closing the achievement gap. Because the patients that I take care of, the kids that I take care of, tend to be on the underachieving side of the spectrum because they have unique challenges that they face at home and in their community. And so I think about what we can do to narrow that gap, to make it not so obvious that your outcome is going to be dictated by, how well you chose your parents. So that's what I think about.
I would offer, as a product of Lansing schools, in knowing the quality of education that I received, that it's incumbent upon me to make sure that all children have the same opportunities. And it's what drives me during long meetings, drives me to committee meetings, drives me to conversations with community members about how can we continue to improve, because I know what this district is capable of, and want to see those opportunities achievable for all students.
Among those things that were mentioned already, I want to see that this district has good communication with the parents, which will help students success. Because a parent who is, in spite of the fact that their kid may be wrong, if they know that they can come to a district and get the answers they need, it'll help with how they help their student and what expectations they put on the student. So to me, among all these other things, that's what I want to see, that good communication, positive communication between the district, the parents, and the students.
The communication with the press. The thing that hurt me the most from day one is how the Lansing State Journal is always against us, and everything except for every murder committed is blame on the Lansing school. Never a kind word, never a congratulations, never covering something positive. And that's one of the things that I also wanted to change when I moved here, because I thought, of course, the parents of Lansing are hearing and seeing these things. I remember a murder that happened in close to Sparrow Hospital, but there was a student, a Sexton student walking on the street, and they had to mention that, like a Sexton student that is walking on, it has something to do with the murder of Sparrow, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And break my heart. And I have to say that the Lansing State Journal has, in the last 3 years, improved a lot. I mean, we get very good articles. They present or write about the stuff that we are, the projects of the kids. And that shows in the fact that we're getting more kids now, I think, is because if all they hear is negative things, the parents, that's what they believe. But Lansing is a tremendous school. I love Lansing, and I love the Lansing Public Schools.
Thank you.
I just echo everything that's been said, and I'm a social worker, so between education and what happens in the world with child welfare, a lot keeps me up at night, but really something that's been shared is everyone's just passionate about the city, the students of this district, and the city, and wanting students to have the same educational experience I had. Those weren't my words last night, but I really liked them when the president said them. So being an alumni of the district is just wanting to hope that our kids are able to have access to opportunities, and how can we do that? It's what drives and keeps me up at night.
Of course, I worry about the achievement gap as well. But I also worry about how come the performance scores don't tell the whole story, and yet that's such a huge focus. I mean, in a lot of ways, it points to one of our strengths, which is diversity. You know, we have the biggest percentage of IEPs in the county. We have a huge, I think we're top 10 in the country for refugees. And things like that will, you know, tell a different story when you just look at a number of like average test scores. But it actually, you know, I'm so happy that my kids get to go to school with this diverse, rich group of people. And that bothers me, that the test scores tell this one story that's actually completely opposite of the realities for most of the kids. So.
Oh.
Yeah, did you say that you have another question?
I did. Now, just real quick, just to summarize, I appreciate you guys responding. In the back of your packet, you'll see that I wrote an op-ed with one of my colleagues, and just advocating for students in urban schools in the state of Michigan. So even in my spare time, I'm thinking about what can I do to help students in urban schools? So I just want to just point that out to you. My last question was, what are 2 to 3 things that you need your next superintendent to accomplish?
Okay, I'll bite. As a board, we are very mindful and very proud of our budget and our healthy fund balance. And under no circumstance will we hire a superintendent who has not demonstrated a commitment and a proven track record of developing and maintaining a healthy fund balance.
I think the budget is very, very important. Another reason I am in the board is because I want to hire the best superintendent for this district. But the other thing is we have so many good things starting in the last few years in the district. We want somebody who can follow, they can improve what we have. They can put us on different level if we can, but not come to more experience, but to study what we have, work with the team we have, and see where we can go together. That is the dream for this district, I think. Thank you.
And I'm going to let Doc have the last word on that. Thank you very much for your interest. Got to keep us on schedule, so
Thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
thank you. We are going to take a quick 4-minute recess. We'll start at 7:20. Please fill out your feedback forms and return them to our MASB consultants.